Evening.
Chef.
How are you, David?
Good.
Good.
Well, as we just all heard, we're here to talk about Marcus off-duty.
Yeah?
You're off-duty now, kind of.
Yeah.
But we're going to start with a quote that I'm going to read from your memoir.
Yeah?
Called Yes, Chef. You're talking about your grandmother. This is early in the book, early in your life. And we'll talk about your grandmother, but she was a big influence on you. And you say here, looking back, my grandmother's food was my introduction to rustic cooking.
Yeah.
It had more levels of flavor than a 12-year-old boy could understand. She didn't know how to build textures the way chefs build texture, but she got it. In her body, she knew how to create those levels.
Yes.
And when I read that, I love that because you're talking about a very real thing. Like, these are people in the world who they're just natural cooks, and it's just in their body.
Yes.
But as we were talking about just a few minutes ago backstage, I feel like this is something that's less and less common in people. And I want to know, how do you think she got that?
Well, first of all, I think we're in a fascinating time when it comes to food in America. It never tastes better. We've never had a bigger challenge. There's some clear winners and some clear losers. And sometimes it's harder to find because cooking is a language that we all should know. Whether you end up being a professional chef or not, but it will enrich everyone's life. It will have an effect on health. It will have an effect on economy, your own family economy, and your DNA. But it also will say, who are we? Who am I? Like, for example, my wonderful wife is here today. We're both from Ethiopia, but we come from different places in Ethiopia. She cooks tribal food, but doesn't consider herself a chef. But she knows how to do it because she also knows how to dance the dance and the rhythm tribal, from her tribe. So cooking is not something that the people over there does. It's something that we do. And just because we have more money than most countries, we're just about to lose one of the pillars that really sets us up as human. Once we lose cooking and DNA from who we are, it's almost like losing a language, and it's going to take generations to get it back. So our finance shouldn't be the lost key for us to lose something. It should really be the key to find out who we are.
And you think that finance comes into play because we're spending our money buying the food, buying prepared foods and not cooking them at home?
Well, it's not only buying, it's also the ritual. So I think about the reason why I'm in front of you guys today is because what I was informed by my grandmother at 6, at 9, and 10, and 11 on who we were. Who were we? We were people that she came out of poverty, we were middle class, but we ate out of her culture, which was roasted chicken one day, chicken soup the next day, and chicken dumpling the third day. Well, I'm a chef. That translates to food cost. I'm a chef in Harlem. Wow, so I can do roasted chicken, and then the next day I could, if I want to be hip, I can do chicken soup with ramen noodles, 26 bucks. And if I want to be really smart, I do a chicken banh mi, 11 bucks for lunch. What did I just do? I translated this very simple thing into 3-4 different directions. It's the same sandwich as my grandmother gave me, because I used to have chicken with chicken liver that she made. Chicken soup was the day after the roasted chicken. When I think about the things that are hip today, pig ears, carrots. If I would say to my grandmother that carrots is hip, she's like, are you crazy?
Some people still think that's true.
Yeah. That's another discussion.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But you also, when you talked about that chicken, you also took it from American, if it was American style roast chicken, to Japanese with the ramen, and then Vietnamese with the banh mi. And that's something that, I mean, if we're talking about globalized food, or
Yes.
what we could call a fusion. I don't know what your preferred term is. I mean, people hate the word fusion, but that's you. And it's a lot in this book. And I'm curious to know about these globalized flavors, because we can combine anything, and we do combine everything.
Yeah.
And I wonder, if we continue to combine everything, do we risk losing singular food cultures?
So they're not mutually exclusive. First of all, I don't call it global. I think it's America. It is the America. When I look out in this room, we should celebrate our diversity. And sometimes you hear words like ethnic. Well, everyone is ethnic. Even white trash is ethnic. It is. Why should we say, oh, they're ethnic? Who are they? Like, what are you talking about? Like, every single person here has an ethnic background. But we also all, on top of it, Americans. And that's what makes us so unique. So in sessions like this, we should really come together and celebrate our diversity. Because we are the only country in the world where you can have sushi on Monday, fried chicken on Tuesday, pizza on Wednesday, because we do not eat yet with a spiritual compass. Which I see a gentleman with a turban here, maybe comes from India, inspired by, well, in India you eat with a spiritual compass. Actually, you wouldn't even think about eating with not a spiritual compass. So we can learn from that culture a lot.
Were you eating with the spiritual compass in Sweden?
So that's a good question. Sweden is probably the least religious country in the world. Mm-hmm. But we did eat with a spiritual compass. And it was the law of common sense, and you didn't waste.
That's a rare religion.
Yeah, it is.
Common sense,
yeah.
Man.
But so what I mean with that is actually that if I went to the summer house and we went fishing, and as kids we would learn how to fish early. So we got maybe 20 mackerels, 30 mackerels, and I went to fish with my uncle and my dad. So if we got 30 mackerels, 10 we cooked up for lunch. 10 to 15 we preserved. 5 to 10 maybe we gave to the elders who couldn't go out and fish. And if I was really lucky, they gave me 4 fish to sell to the tourist. Okay. What does that explain? It explains there's an economy of scale, you help the people who can't, you eat organic and local, because with that mackerel came also mashed potatoes, and it was mashed potatoes with carrots and wild chives that we picked outside, and we preserved for the days that we maybe wouldn't have, right? So that is, for me, eating with a spiritual compass, yes, because you think about the environment, and you eat what's right. Nature and you are one.
Do you think we can get to that place here in America of eating? Can we change that much?
I think the beauty of America is that we're not like anyone else, and that's the good stuff. I think just like when you celebrate democracy and diversity, there's many conversations going on at the same time. So I think the fact that we can get there, and we are there in a certain aspect, but then also it's so big, right? Because thank God for the hippies of California, because they taught us about local, and they taught us about eat what's, work. You don't have to get food from France. You can get food from your farmer right next to you, right? And they taught us chefs, Alice Waters, and that community really taught us chefs, like, you don't have to buy expensive stuff from over there. Buy from your farmer down the street, right? So we've been influenced. So that dialogue is now where we have artisanal food, and there's a smart bee guy in Wicker Park with a beard charging $8 for some honey. You know what I mean? It's all connected to that, right? So artisanal food is here because it started really 30, 40, 50 years ago. So we're getting there. We just have to make sure that we get there so the price doesn't just benefit the 10% that can afford it. So there is really our challenge, right? How can we make artisanal food, but it also reach the people that are most in need? Because before it was the poorest people, that's where all the good food came from, traditionally. And that's still the majority all over the world. in America, we have another phenomenon that the rest of the world is not necessarily challenged with: fast food. So if you think about the poor communities before, let's say, convenience, 1950s, 1960s, all the good food was in those communities because people knew how to cook, and there was no fast food chains. There was less battle of sugar, salt, and unnatural fats. So that phenomena is then targeted towards the poor communities. So that's a US phenomena that we have challenged with, that other countries are now picking up. You see it in Mexico. You see it in other countries that go through sort of this middle-class journey. So there's a lot of movements going on. You just need the movements to talk to each other. And Common Thread is one of those movements. And we just have to have more of them.
When you're writing a book, it seems like it's a weighty challenge to kind of address all that in a book, and also have it be a fun book. You know, how did you do that? What recipes in this book do you think have the power to inspire people to skip McDonald's today and cook?
Well, my books takes a long time. They take 4 years to make. And I want it to take time because I want to see also how is the dialogue outside what we're doing changing. So the part of everything, for me, is really rooted in civil rights. Good food is a civil right. So that's why we position the restaurant in Harlem. It's not by its design. So you can create a dialogue right there. Because that forces us to change the footprint of dining. And if you do it in New York and project that to the rest of the world, you can have a big conversation about it. So what has happened? We have 160 employees. 70% of them work and live in Harlem. Before we started the restaurant, there were not even half a farmer's market. It was like Jonathan that had some food outside. It wasn't really a farmer's market. Okay. Now we have 5 farmer's markets, right?
In Harlem.
In Harlem. Okay. And the farmer's markets have numerous ways of payments. There's also ingredients that are more culturally relevant. And we added a DJ.
Okay.
So why is all those things important? Because now, before we opened, there was a decision made like north of 96th Street, no one needs fresh vegetables. I don't know who took that decision. No one's going to stand up and say, I took that decision. But no one created the solution for it. And for me, I'm very inspired by this woman, Leah Chase, that she said to me, the hood deserves good food too. And she's so right about this. She's 93 years old and has had a restaurant for 50 years in Tremaine, New Orleans. And when you really think about that as a compass, then making the book then becomes a little bit easier. So what does that mean for me? It means to connect with artisanal people across the country. Some of them are well known, but the majority are not. Like Soul East, Vegetarian East, Soul East in the south side of Chicago, right? A vegetarian restaurant in the south side of Chicago that's been there since 1982. They're magical people in local communities that are heroes that stands up through the toughest of time and create these places that they have the right compass. Now, you have People's Produce in Oakland. I've cooked on farms in East Austin. I have this opportunity that when you have an audience, it's your obligation to point at magical things that are happening, affordable, done with the right compass, and that's essentially the second layer of the book. The third is obviously it needs to be really good, delicious recipes, but I can do that. That's my job as a chef. And then also open the door to that other. We don't have to only cook Italian and French American food. We could, but our population, it's not a true reflection of population. The two things we know is that we're heading, and it's going to be delicious and yummy. We're heading towards more of Latin-influenced American food and Asian-influenced American food. And that's good. So this book offers a pantry that is more reflected to that with those ingredients, and also cooking utensils. So I do not think that we're going to lose the Americana dishes that we've had so long. We will add on. We will add, so banh mi will become, our version will become an American sandwich. It doesn't mean that the po' boy has to leave. It's room enough for both. You know, the incredible good taco will become part of American staple. It does not mean that the hot dog's got to go. Hot dog can still stay.
Especially here in Chicago.
Especially here.
It's going to stay, yeah. I want to talk about Harlem a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because let's do a quick, like, 10-second bio on you. Born in Ethiopia, raised in Sweden, cooked in France and Switzerland, here. But you really became the first one as, you know, first Swedish food here in this country at Aquavit. And then you had so you did a Swedish book, you did an African book, you did an African restaurant. And now I feel like you are really have kind of grounded yourself in American food, and you're in, like, I mean, what is more American than Harlem?
Yeah.
And your restaurant there is, I mean, it has become a real fixture in Harlem very quickly. But you didn't come to America until you were in your early 20s. And so I'm just curious when you started to feel ownership over American food and over the concept of being an American.
Well, I think the concept of being, I was born and raised in the 20th century, but we are in the 21st century. And I think being a young black kid raised by a mixed family, where my parents were white, my cousins were Korean, my auntie was Jewish, what can be more American than that?
Yeah, that's
you know,
unique,
first of all, and things goes two ways. American, for a good thing, projects himself to all over the world, right? Well, guess what? When you're a Swedish kid and you're watching MTV and Prince is doing his thing, you want to go there. Trust me. You know, or you see like Swedish bands and then Run DMC comes. You want to go to whatever that is. You want to go.
ABBA doesn't stand a chance.
You know, ABBA is good as a base, and this link with what can be more American than hip hop. And it does link back to the food, because if you think about that book, Off Duty, you think about the moment we're in now with mixed cultures. Hip hop for me sets the stage for anything else artistically in the world today. It's crossed race. Hip hop is in the core, your parents' music in the background. Well, my fried chicken is inspired by the community that I work in. Then, in hip hop, you add one or two DJ spins on top of that, and out comes something very original that is American. At first time, maybe for the listener, sounds like just like a lot of noise. But it's a story there. There's a narrative of originality. Well, I knew that I had to cook a fried chicken when I came to Harlem. But my goal was not to cook it like any auntie, or definitely not, I wouldn't want to dare to step on Sylvia's.
Nope.
No,
Nope.
I was not. So right away I had to start and cook something that was very familiar, but I had to make choices. Right away I said, we're going to do dark meat, bone-in, skin on. Right? Boom. It's a little bit separate. She might marinate in buttermilk. We marinate in buttermilk and coconut milk. I don't know what spices she's had on. I had my spices on. I fry on low heat and on high heat to create the highest crisp. Right there, it's of familiarity, but when you taste it, it's very original and different. So people aspire to come to America from all over the world. That's why people know about us and we know so little about them. That's why immigrants can very quickly fit into the society, because we know so much about this country. We study it because we're in awe of America, the complexity, the highs and ups. So for me, I think the privilege of being black helped me very quickly. And I was also told in Europe, you can work in these restaurants, but don't ever think about own one of these restaurants. That makes it a very clear choice for me. I got to go to America.
Well, I also read in the book you had trouble even working there. I mean, here and I mean, there and here. I mean,
Yeah,
there's some.
I think my black journey is not different than, in that sense of the outside looking in, than the majority of African Americans or people that come from that, you know, so I don't really want to highlight my journey because I think I've been so fortunate and blessed and have other opportunities that other people didn't have. So we all deal with them differently. They all come out differently, but we become, when it works, we become master, precise. You got to be a sharpshooter and you got to be precise, right? Because you know your moment can be up like this and you're not going to get a lot of shots. It's not fair, but it also forces you to be focused. So that's why, for example, when I got the shot of when I got to go to a 3-star Michelin restaurant, I didn't speak French. I had to teach myself French. I knew that I had to take that opportunity because it wouldn't be another window. When I got the chance to become an executive chef at 23, I didn't wait around and say, hey, maybe the next round it's gonna happen next time around. You get one opportunity, you take it, and you go for it. And it prepared me. I think just being a person of color just prepared me. My father taught me very early about this, and he was white. So he had to teach a young black kid how to deal with race very early.
Lots
Which
of
is
places.
a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say lots of places I want to go from there, but actually what's coming to my mind as you're talking about taking that shot, is I'm thinking about soccer. Yeah, I want to keep talking about soccer a little bit, how that's influenced your career.
Yeah.
I don't know if these people know about you in
So
soccer,
I love
but
soccer.
it's a big thing.
You know, that's one of the things that we Afro-Eurotrash bring to your country is soccer. We apologize, but we love it.
Wow.
It's just one
You
of
just
those-
made everyone in this room really uncomfortable.
Yeah,
you know, like,
okay,
we don't think you're Afro, you're.
But I learned a lot in soccer. I learned that you listen to coach, you listen to chef in the kitchen. You work really hard as a group, but you can still fail. You have to, in the kitchen team, it's us against them, whoever them are, you stick together. You're like a band of misfits a little bit. And there's always another guy in the kitchen working just as hard as you. On the soccer pitch, it's the same thing. So this, it helped me to stay longer in the kitchen. It helped me I just drew on these similarities. And I feel it's still very rewarding to play soccer. And I love that La Familia feel that you have in the kitchen team. It's very rare, it's very unique, and from outside looking in, it could be like, why are they screaming at each other? But it's also a sense of care and trust and protectionism. So, because what people don't realize, kitchen first and foremost, it's a very dangerous workplace. It's wet floors, people running around with knives, and it's hot oil. So it can't be a place where, I wonder what you're thinking about that. Oh, I would like your opinion on that. No, this happened at 8 o'clock, 3 undercovers right now. You need to speak very direct. Don't go over there. Hot behind, move. These are all words of actually care, more than the words of why they're so rude. So kitchens are just unique workplaces. And I'm sure when I've been lucky enough to be on a couple of film sets, you can say that's the only place where I think it's similar. The director shouts, he doesn't scream, or she doesn't scream. They're just very direct with their orders out because it's a place of work. Does not work in an office, by the way. I've tried it. Does not work. Do not try it. Not cool.
How much opportunity do you have right now to cook in your restaurants?
I think working on my business and in my business and on my craft and in my craft, these are the biggest challenge. I work on my craft every day. Writing is working on my craft. Eating is part of that. But I don't have a vocabulary if I don't cook. And after this, actually, I'm going cooking with Paul Kahn, and I can't wait. It's like the most liberating thing to me to cook. So I would say 50% of my time, I can work in and on my craft in the kitchen. And then the other time, I spend on either, like quarter of that other time, maybe we're in production, whether it's TV or whether it's making book, because the narrative is very important. And then the last part is managerial. And it could be, staff, it's stuff, that unpredictable stuff. So what I call the coffee shift, which is so important. That's when you really get the pulse of what's going on, right? You just position yourself in the restaurant and, I check in with the bartender, or I talk to the prep cook, or I know who, that shift is very important. And you can never schedule yourself on that. You just got to do that.
Are people coming to Red Rooster hoping to see you?
I think it's a mixed bag, right? Our restaurant is, the larger mission is really to change how people, from a customer point of view, how you what to do when you're in a larger African-American iconic place. What it was before, 50 years ago, we know, but what it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, was this. Oh, I'm going to jump in a bus. Oh, I'm going to take a picture. Oh, and I'm going to go back up on the bus, and I'm going to leave. Like, just imagine when you live there, the characters there. No one wants to be in a community where you just come and snap a picture and just leave. It's very demoralizing. And it was annoying to me. I wanted to create normal behavior pattern. A normal behavior pattern is the way I interact when I just walk down the street here. You go into the coffee shop, you buy coffee, you maybe walk over to the magazine store, you check out what's going on culturally. For me, I look about what graffiti has been here before, because I want to see what stickers are up, who are the musicians, who are the storytellers. So we do these behavior patterns in foreign countries. We do them in other places, yet not in our urban environment. So rather than complain about that, I was like, you know what? Be part of the solution. But the solution wasn't easy. I knew it would take the rest of my life. So I moved from a very comfortable apartment in Midtown to Harlem and started the work. And my father, that started as a fisherman and became an academic, a PhD in geology, he always said, if you're going to do something, approach it like you're going to get a master and a PhD, and that will take you 10 years. So the first 5 years, I didn't feel like I had the license, just because I moved into Harlem, to open a restaurant. So I had to learn, what is this community like? What is it on a Monday at 2? What is it on Sunday at 1? What are the nuances of this community? So I biked and I walked, and me and my wife started to learn the community. We went from shopping at Whole Food to Seatown. Not a cool move, but we did it. But it was important because, it checked the balances of how can these stores miss, it's August in New York, you know what you're gonna eat. It's a compass of tomatoes and corn. How can these stores miss tomato and corn season when it's growing in New Jersey? That's a design move. That is completely directly linked towards Jim Crow more than it is I don't believe in food deserts in that sense. That is a design move. So rather than complain about that, you got to do something. You got to put up something other. And so for the first 5 years was about learning and what this community was about. And then the second part of those 5 years was, okay, let's put the restaurant there. And with the restaurant, we can then activate the farmers market, activate the community lodge, and saying to the community, you can work in hospitality. Here's an aspirational platform. And then you can say to the other community, which is, we need you to come. Get off the bus, get into the restaurant, have lunch at an affordable price, go to the store right next door, buy a newspaper, walk over to Schaumburg, hang out at the Studio Museum, and you just had a wonderful day. That's it. Normal behavior pattern. That's it.
So part of the plan was banking on people coming from outside of Harlem to say, oh, this is Marcus Samuelsson. This is, this is sort of safe for me. Not safe in a physical safe way, but like I know this, or I'm going to get what I expect.
The whole proposition of living in a place like Chicago and New York goes against safe. You shouldn't live there. You know what I mean? I come from the safest environment in the world, Sweden. I'm safer in Harlem than I feel in Sweden. It's just a preference point, right? I just like urbanism. I love it. But I do think that one role as a chef, and for me, how do I want to live my body of work, is that, should I spend all my life on cooking for the 2%, or can I spend a big part of my life of cooking for the 98%? And if I am fortunate enough to have a platform that involves, we communicate to 1 million people a month online, being on TV, cooking, not have to worry about where our meal is going to come from, I owe it to my community to do something meaningful that it goes beyond cooking only for rich people. It's my compass. I don't mind cooking for rich people, but you know what? It becomes more delicious when the post office guy, the teacher, the person that just got out of a job, the person who's looking for a job, can sit next to each other, because that's what really essentially a restaurant does, right? And then when those guys start talking to each other, they realize we have more in common. In New York, they both like cultural things. They're going to talk about jazz. They're going to talk about hip hop. They're going to talk about the game, whatever that was, right? And that's what a restaurant could do. And that's what restaurants in the black community constantly have done. When I look at what Leah Chase's restaurant represents, it was the first integrated restaurant in America. When Frank Sinatra was done with his band, right, they went to Leah together to eat. When they planned a big part of the civil rights movement, they planned it inside Leah's restaurant. When the mayor needed the black vote, they went there. So it's not just only about her, it's also about what those restaurants essentially represent and who's in those places. And guess what? There were people who had jobs, they were in and out of jobs, there were people with a lot of money, and people with no money. But you could always count on coming to a counter, sit, have a meal, and you're good. And that's essentially the community aspect of bringing what Red Rooster fulfills. And we have some checks and balances. Half a block away from me is Sylvia. She's done this for 52 years, showing us how to be community relevant.
I want to talk about Patrick Clark for a second. Can you give us, just for the people here who don't know, just give us a quick synopsis, and then we'll go into my question.
Patrick Clark, when I came to this country, was the leading African-American chef. He cooked for Clinton. He was the chef at Tavern on the Green back in the day, which was the biggest chef's job you could have. He made a big salary. I'm like, you can make that much money on cooking, on shopping? He'd been to France. When he entered a room, all the other chefs in New York said, what's up, chef? And he carried himself as just as much in a room as Alfred Portal and David Burke and Charlie Palmer, these other chefs in his era. He died drastically of a heart attack in the late 90s at 42 years old. And I think when somebody that is a leader in something die, it's not just the sadness of that to that family, it's also the other guys that he had under for him, working for him, his sous chefs, his servers, the community at large. And it became a void for a very long time. But I tell you what, Charlie Trotter, that just passed away, the first thing Charlie did was, we're going to do a book for Patrick Clark. We're going to do a book for Patrick. And Marcus, you have to help me do the recipe testing for it. And we did do a book for Patrick. And we also did a fundraiser for him at Tavern on the Green. And Charlie always stood up and he put all the chefs together to work together. And he was the first one that was there to help Patrick Clark's family.
Well, I bring him up because it wasn't only that he was, the most prominent black chef when he was there, but he was the only prominent black chef. Okay.
Yes.
And there's this concept out there that you kind of touch on in your memoir, and also Hilton Als has written about in the New Yorker, about the only one.
Yeah.
And when you're the only one, it's the idea is that could that prevent other people from coming up, because people look and say, oh, we have a great black chef, that's Patrick Clark, we have a whatever it is. Do you think that's changed at all? I mean, he died a while ago, and I look at the landscape and I don't see very many prominent black chefs.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question to ask in this very city in front of 500 people. I tell you that. That's a great question. It is a good question, because it's a lot of meat there,
Well, we're getting to audience questions
Yeah.
in 10 minutes, so I want to
But
go
I mean,
deep.
our journey, how we came to hospitality, is very unique. Let's just understand that it's very unique. Because as black people, we're the only race that had a stigma of serving. So when the generation before me had a chance to send their kids to college, cooking they did everything they could to get out of the kitchen, not to get back into the kitchen. Choosing to cook, it's almost a liberal, middle-class choice. When the black community had the chance to go to college and send their kids to better education, it came down to the normal 5 professions, right? Law, police officer, lawyer, doctor, finance, teacher, nurse, you name it, right? Cooking, white or black, in this country didn't become a profession until the mid-70s. When we came up in cooking, we came up to basically sous chef level, and the minute we were the chefs, they hired a German guy on top of that. Plus, I mean, this is so deeply rooted, plus, we never had access to banks, right? There were laws to make sure that African Americans could not get bank loans, right? So that meant that a whole generation of us couldn't actually, when I talk about the aspirations of Red Rooster, it means that when you sit on the bus and you're a teenager, you're going to say one day, I'm going to work there. That aspiration matters. When that comes ripped out, when you don't have an uncle doing it or an auntie doing it, when that gets ripped out, how many stories do you hear from Italian Americans or other cultures that, oh yeah, my uncle owned the restaurant, so I started working in a restaurant. And I went to college and then I came back and started running the business. That's a beautiful way of taking care of something that's been within your family. When that sort of got ripped out from us, or we didn't take care of it, or we looked at other opportunities, all of a sudden, one of our main trades were gone. And I don't blame anyone. I don't blame us from doing that, because if you think about barbecuing, you talk about the pit master. Everyone in this room knows to the core heart who the real pit master was. Everyone. It's very similar to who wrote rock and roll, and then there's Elvis.
Yep.
It's the same story, right? So there wasn't a lot there for us to go into that field. Now, I come from I'm of the same, but yet different. And that's why all of us here, blackness specifically, we're not one. We are of one, but we also very complex. And we come to the space very differently. I came to the space of that privileged middle-class person that I was just talking about. So I choose to be in cooking. I didn't have to. I choose to do it. And I did not come from the stigma of that. So in many ways, we all land on it very differently. That was my journey. I'm not saying it's better or worse, it's just my journey. And When I see black chefs coming up today, first of all, the majority of all chefs, it's an anonymous labor, regardless. Chinese, American, African American, Latin American, whatever it is. It's an anonymous labor. It's just very few that has to, and I'm part of that, to be able to communicate what I do. And there is a listening audience there. So that's rare, black, white, Chinese, or anything. It becomes a little bit more, so it's rare to have that. But so many of us have always had, every person in here, the normal is, we work with anonymous crafts. We do. My passion was not to get known, my passion was to work with my craft and provide. And if it needs me to also sometimes get behind, lead from the middle, lead in front, that's what I will do. It's complex, it's not easy, and I'm glad we're talking about it because the more we discuss it, it's a clumsy sort of way of getting there, but I also see a lot of hopes. When I look in my own kitchen, when I look at a lot of these, this young chef, Ian, is actually from Chicago, he works for David Chang. He got next. When I think about a couple of these young cooks, this kid, Tristan, that comes from Houston, he got next. This is young girl, Naisha, from LA. So when I look around, it looks good, it looks delicious. And those stories are a little bit different because guess what? Naisha is half black, half Korean American. Mm-hmm. Her food is good. Kimchi on the fried chicken? Yes. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's delicious.
Yeah, right.
It's just different, as it should be. It goes back to what I talked about hip-hop, right? Mm-hmm. It's the root of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for answering that so thoughtfully. We're going to go to audience questions in just a minute, but before we do, I have to ask you about your clothes, man.
Yeah.
I mean, can we just show these? You all see his socks? No, I mean, what? You just pull them up. Come on. They're like bright orange.
Socks?
I mean,
yeah.
And in the book, you're wearing all sorts of. I mean,
yeah.
There's some crazy looks.
Yeah.
First of all, do you admit that you're a hipster? Because you are.
You know, the real hipsters. You look at the real hipsters. When I look at real people who were hip to me, I got to go back to. There's a couple of people that stand out, and I got nothing on there. I'll tell you that.
Who stands out?
Well, Bob Marley. I mean, talk about wearing jeans on jeans the way he did. Always open shirt, never looking like wrong, just like. Yeah. I think about Fela Kuti. Can you wear more pattern than that? I think about David Bowie. I mean, what weird, different Prince. Mm-hmm. You know, so comparing to those guys, and actually, as a matter of fact, any band that came from the late 70s, I look pretty conservative. Yes. Yeah, you put me next to Tito Jackson circa 1978, I look like the calm dude.
I don't know, man. You might be wearing the same hat, honestly.
Yeah. No, Tito's hat would be this.
Okay, right.
Tito's hat would be up here. So, no, but I do think, that the clothing, when we left the house as kids, we knew, because again, my mom knew, the minute we left the house as kids, think about it. We were the only black kids. We were the only other kids. We were the only kids that didn't have basically blue eyes. It would, people came up in the store and touched our skin, touched our hair. It was a scene, just going to the deli. Mm-hmm. So my mom's like, you are not leaving the house unless you have to look like impeccable. Mm-hmm. And socks were part of that. You know what I mean?
Right, of course.
So she's like, we're not allowed to leave. Mm-hmm. And standing up. So we stood out even if I didn't want to stand out. Mm-hmm. So then I was like, you know what? The luxury of being minority and celebrating that versus playing that out, because I'm used to it since I was 5 years old. People have always pulled in that hair or touched that skin or asked another something. So I'm like, I might as well just celebrate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have questions? Anyone? Oh, you're good.
Yeah.
Clap for the outfit.
Come on. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and we have microphones somewhere. You can.
Yeah.
Here we go.
I live in New Orleans, so thanks for the props for Miss Leia
Yeah.
at Dookie Chase's. Could you talk a little bit about the work that you do with fellow chefs like John Besh and the scholarships for minority culinary students?
Yeah. Well, John Besh, there's a chef down the street from Leah in New Orleans. You know, he also understands map and compass. He also understands that he is there and stands on the shoulder of what not only Leah has provided, but also the jazz musicians and all the musicians in New Orleans. So I work specifically with CCAP, which is it's an after-school program that provides life skills through culinary skills in inner cities. John works with that as well, but it's really about a place for teenagers to come when you have so much energy to learn about how should I, you know, yes, they cook, but it's also about, you know, how should a resume look like? Showing up on time, and saying yes, ma'am, yes, sir, just getting them ready for the next step. And we realized that kitchens is a great place for that next step because it's an environment that is vibrant and they feel like they're just, if they have good attitude, they have a place. Then if they don't become chefs, that's okay, but guess what? They're not gonna know how to cook for the rest of their life. They understand what the workplace is. And very often, if they do really well, we send them to college, to universities like Cornell, to Johnston & Wells. And we now, 15 years later, have CCAP owners, pastry chefs, executive chefs. We even have Carlton, the youngest master sommelier. This kid grew up in the roughest area in Washington, D.C. And he's 28, a master sommelier. And he came out of CCAP. So there's so many success stories. So they just need somebody to guide them and be there after school and provide it. And we have restaurants, so we will never say no to two hands. And I know Paul Kahn is doing that here in Chicago. That was something that Chef Charlie Trotter started here as well. I know Ricky's thinking about those things. So we as chefs, because we do come from different, our journey was not straight, we tend to work with those kids and appreciate them because we can very often see ourselves in that journey.
We have a question from this young lady up
Hey, how are you?
Which is the most weirdest ingredient on Chopped?
Ah, that's a good question. That's a good question. You know, I never have an issue when it's natural food. The food that sort of is factory produced is always weird because it doesn't taste natural, right? So, you know, I would say, okay, you got me. Lamb balls.
Oh, okay.
Lamb balls.
All right.
That was weird, but it was, if you know how to cook it, it's good. If you know how to cook it.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of weird ingredients.
They're like hush puppies.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. We're going to have the
Hi, Chef Marcus. Any plans to colonize in our food deserts on the South Side? Any of your restaurants?
You know what? Somebody.
It's definitely a need. I mean,
Yeah,
we've spoken about
it's a
this.
big
We
need.
know it's
Big
a
need.
vast area that needs some colonization,
Yeah.
and sure sounds like you are the right person for it.
No, I don't know. I don't know enough. I'm inspired by
Well,
it.
we need to talk.
Yeah. But I don't. First of all, I have a lot of respect for the community here at large because there's so many good cooks. I don't think in Chicago and the great eaters. The positioning of the restaurants are a little bit in the same area, and there's definitely need there, definitely. You know, what Theaster is doing, Theaster Gates, I'm very inspired what Theaster is doing with the art movement of getting those buildings and having young people working with him and drawing a crowd to that part of time. So Theaster is doing the same work in his medium. And I know the food conversation is there for him as well. it's funny because the South Side has some really good food too. And you think about, let's talk about barbecue. That is the most misunderstood northern phenomena because it's really not from here, and it shows so often that we don't know what to do with it. Well, Lem's barbecue is pretty good. It's on the South Side. Have anyone been, you guys have been to Lem? Yeah, it's delicious. It's probably one of the better northern barbecue places you can find. Yeah? So, and then the anchor really stopped. Army Lewis is shut. And that's a shame, you know? And that's when you think a restaurant is just the four walls, you're wrong. It's really what can come out of that restaurant. So the value proposition of what Armin Louis meant to this community didn't connect, right? Because it would have meant a little bit more. Someone would have said, you know what? I'm going to take care of that place. And I'm going to start the dialogue from that very place.
But I think one of the things that happened is a little bit about what you talked about. Everyone, I mean, many of the people that lived in that area could and did cook just as well. So it was sometimes a difficult thing to do because this was not something that was, you weren't drawing in enough people.
No, I know, I get it. Food.
Right, she was saying that what happened was what Marcus was talking about before, where people were cooking because you didn't have all these fast food options. You had to cook, right? And so, and that's been lost. And that's the story of it's not just the South Side, it's not just Harlem, it's not just the North Side, it's this country.
But there's a couple of things. You gotta almost be possessed by the mission, right? Because food and easy should never go together. Great food and easy don't exist, right? So our mission, so that's why I'm like, I look at it, I'll go tomorrow again, I'll look at it every time I'm here, and I learn new things, I find new things, and that's why I want to highlight a place like that vegetarian place that has been there since 1982, and so there are all these magical things, even in the most rough urban environment. But I do think, again, I don't know enough about it, but I'm very intrigued, and I have to learn more, and I'm very empowered what Theaster is doing. Very, very.
Any other questions?
We have time for one more, right down here.
There we go.
In today's cooking environment, we have all these cooking shows now, you know, Top Chef, Master Chef, Chopped. You know, how important it is to a chef today to be featured on those shows?
Well, it depends. Again, they're not mutually exclusive. It depends what dialogue you need to have, right? You have an example of a local hero here, like Paul Kahn, my buddy that I'm going to cook with tonight. He's not on TV, but he's a very relevant, important American chef to this very community at large. So he chose to say, you know what, I can swing this without, because I have my Chicago tribe, my customers, my cooks. So there's a great example of saying, no, I don't have to. It's not like he's never been asked, trust me. So it depends. Each person that has those opportunities should really weigh it and say, how does this fit into the journey, the story that I'm trying to tell? So our mission is to draw people to Harlem, and hopefully they eat at Red Rooster. If you're going to have that conversation, you need to be very visible. Otherwise, it won't work. That's one of the reasons why Southside doesn't work right now, because it doesn't have a clear ambassador and saying, I'm going to do this, and you're all going to come from far and local, right? Paul has a different conversation, just different cards, you know? But it is important if you want to have that conversation. But you can also do it very good and relevant without it. And that's a good thing, because when I started cooking, we didn't have options. And the good thing is that we have options today. You can come to this space and become a food writer, a blogger. You can become a food stylist. You can become an executive chef. When we started, it was only one way, which in many ways made it easier. But today we have more options. And that's a good thing.
Thank you, Chef.
All right. Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you. Thank you very much.